Hey there, G3XE here, and I have a Wargame Talk episode for all you Wargamers out there about my 1,000 point army, my first army for Age of Sigmar. I've talked about it before, but I finally got 1,000 points, actually 1,100 points painted up. No, yeah, 1,100. And so I'm going to talk about that and the way forward from here. So if you know my channel, which, I'm not a very big channel, but I'm started collecting the Lizardmen or Seraphon. And I was looking for a color scheme, and one fun thing I like to do is look for dice that I like at the little dice rack that you see in comic book stores and nerd stores of all sorts. And it's almost like little color schemes that you can kind of just look at, and you just are like, because I think that having matching dice is cool. I mean, some people are just purely for the game, but I'm very hobby-focused person. I like everything to match. So I wanted to go all out and have like a very nice army. So these dice were the ones that I came across. I really liked how vibrant the red popped out, and I like the blue and black feel to them. Oh. So I decided to go that way with my, there we go, with my army. And I also bought the Seraphon Battle Tome. Now, it doesn't have any of the Battle Tome ability stuff because it was made before those were a thing, unfortunately. But I really don't mind because the lore is awesome. I never really was into Warhammer Fantasy, so I don't have any previously conceived notions about the Lizardmen lore, and there's some really cool stuff. It mixes like Aztec stuff with like star things, and I'm going to get into that in a second, because this talk is going to be about my first army, GW, forging the narrative, some thoughts therein. So, without further ado, I did this the metal tray method that I saw a dude at the game store do. You put glue magnets to the bottom of all the models, and then you can just transport them. Oh, there we go. Transport them like that. So the centerpiece model, I suppose you could say, is my Saurus Old Blood on Carnosaur. And none of these are like finished, but they're good. They're tabletop quality. All the bases are done with this kind of dark sand color with a black rim, and he's magnetic. He pops off, so that if I want to do a Saurus, a Scar Veteran on Carnosaur, I can. And so I really like his look. Then the next biggest, he's 260 points, I believe. Then for 300 points, we have the Bastillodon. Yes, and I left this unglued, but I just stuck it with some poster putty, so I can switch it out for the snake variant if I wanted to. Everyone agrees that the Searing Beam is the best option, but I just really like the idea of the snakes piling out, and I think it's going to be fun. So these are just regular rocks from the backyard I added onto the base, and other than that, it's just, old Bassie. My 300 points in a 1,000 list, that's a big commitment, but it's a powerhouse, and it's kind of my tank. I'm just going to plow down into the field with and just start searing beaming things, and if they want to come take me out, that's fine, because this thing's a beast in close combat as well. You're not going to take it down very easily. So then we have one battle line of Saurus Knights with the blazing lance, or celestial lances or something. So there they are in their glory. Here's the Alpha. He has a cool little hat on. And I chose the lances, one, because they're cool, also because they have a special ability called Blazing Lances, where if they charge and then to hit roll of a 6, cause an additional mortal wound. Now, that's not a very, very powerful ability, but I really liked it, and I decided to paint the lances as if they are burning. So I mix white and silver for the blades, and then they get progressively darker into fire colors as you go down. So I really like that, and I'm thinking strategically I want to do something where I have the Bastillodon or something nearby, or maybe just some other troops, and then I I have both of them there, right? And then I charge in with both, and then do the Blazing Lances attack from the knights. Then when it's my movement the next time, I retreat them back, but still have this unit in combat to tie up that unit again. And then when next they can charge again and get Blazing Lances again. Don't know if that would be effective, but I just think it's really cool. I like the idea of charging like a joust, and then you pass them and you come by. Then more battle line. I have a unit of 20 skinks. I will get them all out here. They are cute as can be, and I really like them. I was doing the skinks as a kind of inverse. Whenever you have a paint job for an army, I think there are two different types of kind of main people in the army. For instance, let's say Terminators and Space Marines if you're doing a 40k army. I like the idea of doing a primary color and a secondary color on Space Marines, let's say, and then a secondary color becomes the primary for the other type of troops. So like Terminators would be the opposite. I think that really looks good, and it helps differentiate them, but still make them feel like they're in the same force. So there are all the little skinks. They're kind of off screen, but there's a lot of them. This is the alpha, and he's the first kit bash I ever did, because I actually got the skinks a long time ago to use as kobolds and in D&D, which they work really good on, and it took me forever to paint all 20 of them. But not just because it took a while, but because I would do some, then stop, then do some, then stop. So he has the arms from one of the little goblin kits, and he's holding this club, and I just love it because he's so buff compared to the other skinks. So he's the skink alpha, and he's just like, come at me. Then that leaves me, they're 160, they're 120 points, leaves me with a 100 point slot. So I have two different things I can slide into there. One is another battle line choice of 10 Source Warriors. I like them a lot. They look awesome. I'm actually playing in a D&D campaign right now where one of these models is my Lizardman Barbarian, named Iggy Bluescale. And so they were probably my favorite model out of these to paint, although I did like the Bastildon a lot. Definitely favorite infantry model. The knights are kind of hard to paint, to be honest. I made the mistake of gluing them onto their mounts and then painting them. But anywho, so that's 100, and that, I don't know, maybe it's better for taking objectives. Here's their little alpha. He's like up on this rock, kind of leading the charge. But then again, they're 5-up save. They do ignore -1 rend, and you could Mystic Shield them. Well, except I can't because, as you can see, no wizard. Well, that's where the thing switches in. So I could also take him out and take a Skink Star Priest for 100 and have him instead. And what he would allow is to cast and unbind spells. I think I would keep him behind my ranged troops and just keep him casting cool stuff and have them peppering stuff with range fire, and then doing their they have a cool ability called Wary Fighter, where during their turn to pile in, instead you can have them do a retreat move, and it's awesome because then the next turn they're still available to shoot and stuff. So I was just kind of testing it out on my own against some just like generic Chaos Demon models that I have from 40k. And I was just kind of testing it out, and at first I was like, oh, definitely going with the 10 troops because that's more bodies. But then I started thinking, Arcane Bolt, in a 1,000 point game, Arcane Bolt and Mystic Shield are important, so... Anyway, and I haven't decided what abilities and artifact I'm going to give to the army yet, so if you have any ideas, let me know. So yeah, this is my 1,000 point army and magnetic bases. So I also wanted to talk about GW and forging the narrative and that type of thing. So 8th edition 40k is coming out, which is awesome. They're making a lot of changes to make it more simple, but it's still going to retain a lot of complexity. Like, I'm looking at the rules from an Age of Sigmar standard, and I'm like, oh my god, this is like similar enough that it would, if someone just got into Age of Sigmar, it'd be a perfect stepping stone into 40k. So I'm really excited about that, and it really does seem like all the kind of like loudmouth type people on the internet who just kind of complain over and over about stuff. It's like, dude, calm down. Like, I guess there's always you always have a right to express your opinion, but the people who were complaining when we were in 7th edition, which is when I came into 40k, were complaining about all these things, and then those are the things that they're changing about in 8th edition, and then they're still complaining. So I was like, I kind of had a moment as all these leaks come out, and we're having GW actually talk about the rules and talk about what they're going to do before they do it, and then still people are complaining, and they're like, oh, I don't like how the big Marines are big or whatever, and it's just like, what? Okay, it's kind of a realization that, oh, okay, they, to me at least, was like, okay, there's a certain percentage who are just complaining to complain. And I think a lot of people make fun of the open play, narrative play thing. They're like, oh, we're all just, or maybe not make fun, but they're like, oh, we're just all going to play match play. So I'm in defense of open play, narrative play. And what I mean by this is, like, people make fun, too, I think, of forging the narrative, and that kind of term that GW came out with, but I really believe it's true, and I want to talk about what a narrative game means to me. Because a lot of people in Age of Sigmar say, oh, I can't latch onto the narrative, nothing's like defined yet, it's very, very abstract, which I guess is true, but I think that provides far more fertile ground for making up your own stories. And I don't consider narrative games like, I'm going to read this description of a battle in a book, and then, okay, we're going to have the same exact composition of armies on the table. Like, if you're really into 40k lore, that's awesome, and you can do that. But I just, like, with 40k, I would, like, make up my own reasons for why, you know, like, I had kind of funny names for my Chaos Lord and all that, and then a lot of people would be like, oh, I guess, but it doesn't really fit the fluff. And I'm like, or they'd be like, okay, well, Khorne and Tzeentch wouldn't work together in an army, and I'm like, dude, like, okay, you know, it doesn't, like, these are demons, like, they'll do crazy shit, you know? So, with that in mind, I'm just putting these dice out for comparison to the color scheme. With that in mind, I want to talk about what a narrative game would mean to me, and I think it's more about personalizing your miniatures, having a story, and keeping track of, like, how your battles kind of affect that story. So what do I mean by that? Well, the models that I'm going to move forward with my Seraphon army, I'm probably not going to collect too much more. I'm going to stay at 1,000 points, but I was interested in the Razordor Salamanders or whatever, but these are fine cast models, and they're the only place you can get them seems like is on the GW site. So I bought this Reaper one that looks exactly like it, and these 3 lizard men that are going to be his handlers, right? And then I also bought this dude. I found one model that really would be a good Croxagore, and I'm going to build that. But then mainly, I made my Slan. I wasn't going to buy the GW Slan, and so people are going to be like, oh, that doesn't fit the thing, or it's too big, but this is just what I built. So this is the Slan. It's a Reaper Bones model that I built this whole little palanquin thing around. I used an empty dice container and glued it to the bottom so that he looks like he's floating. And, you know, obviously I haven't painted him yet, but I was really proud of this at least. And he looks like he's just lounging around and is, like, floating around. So he is going to be my leader guy, right? And I've decided to name him. So there's all these Aztec names with the Lizardmen, with the Seraphon. So I've decided to name him, and they, you know, like, they have a lot of, like, TLs, like, Atl or, like, Odal or stuff like that. Drawn from, you know, it's like fake, what's it called? The the Aztec language or Mayan language. It starts with an N. Anyway, I'm gonna call my slan Jeremodal, the bull slan. So a little play on Jeremiah the bullfrog, right? So it's like Jeremodal was a bull slan. So and they leave the lore open-ended, I feel like, so you can make up your stories. The realms allow anything to be possible. So this dude, Jeremodal, if you don't know, the lizard, the Seraphon, right? They have the demon keyword because they're kind of orders demons. Because the lizards are not actually real. They're just magical creation embodiments from the memories and minds of this super powerful slan that control these kind of like Aztec temple-looking spaceships up in the stars. And they don't have armies, they have constellations. And I just think that's super cool. So old Jeremodal is the only actual one, right? And he's creating these guys, much like the kind of like perversions and bad thoughts of men and mortals create chaos demons in the realm of chaos. He kind of creates these celestial good. They still have the daemon or whatever keyword, but and there are special rules within the Seraphon army that deal extra damage to chaos demons. I know the Slan has one, and the Skink Star Priest has one that is essentially, it's a thing that gives something a -1 to hit, or gives a +1 to hit. You can cast it to your guys or enemy guys. But if you cast it to enemy guys who are chaos demons, they also take D3 mortal wounds, and there's a casting value of 6. So it's 1 harder than an arcane bolt, but it's essentially against chaos demons an arcane bolt that also gives them -1 to hit. So I'm just like, that's awesome. So these guys hate, and in the lore it talks about, they hate chaos demons. So in my kind of story, Jeremodal has figured out that the only way for these order demons, right? So what he does is he imagines them, and they appear into reality. And though they are demons and they're like figments of magic and they're filled with celestial starlight, they don't realize it, and they're like automatons and still act in their old ways. So like if he created a skink, that skink would still do all his normal skink things and sunbathe and go and eat and whatever. And he's created on their little star like a kind of tropical paradise for all the lizards to live in. And then so the lizards kind of act normal because they don't know anything's different, really. But he's figured out that he's worried that their bloodline's going to be lost because these aren't real lizards. They can't reproduce. He's the only real one, and though he will live for many thousands of years because he's this powerful wizard, he won't live forever. And so in order to replenish the Seraphon, people, to save them from just their small little existence flickering out now in the mortal realms, he's figured out that killing chaos demons for whatever magical reason imbues them, like it evens the score with their celestial energies and makes the lizards more real. And so eventually, if you kill enough chaos demon, that then the lizards who are celestial demons then become the real lizard people. So it's kind of like Pinocchio, right? They eventually can become a real boy. And again, the lizards don't know this. They just think, they just have this born hatred of chaos demons. But that is the overall arching campaign of Jeremodal, and the Seraphon that he summons is because he wants the lizards to continue on living, and so he has to kill enough chaos demons to get a sufficient amount so that lizards can start being real. So this does a couple things for my narrative, which is gives me a reason for why things die and why they come back the next battle, narratively. So narratively speaking, whenever a Seraphon dies, they burst into starlight and get beamed back up. Their spirit, gets beamed back up to the mothership, to their star. And so they don't want them to die. It's not like, let's just throw thousands of troops at it because it doesn't matter, because that puts them back at net zero. So when they're back at net zero, they have to start all over again with that pushing the boulder up the hill task of killing enough Chaos Demons to become real. So the Slan has a vested interest in them not dying, but if they died, he can also just reimagine them and resummon that same kind of character back into existence. So that gives me a narrative reason for why, for example, my old blood could perish in battle, but be back the next time, and have built-in hatreds toward enemies of old. Like, he can have flashes of memories that, like, wait, do I know that opposing general? It feels like I do, because when he was reincarnated the last couple times, that general killed him. So it gives me a narrative reason to specifically... So, like, if an opponent rolls super lucky one time and kills me in a stupid thing, I can be like, he has a vendetta against that model. If my skink priest... She's actually a priestess. If she survives an entire battle, right? And then, like, maybe a couple of battles, then, like, I want to keep track of how many battles, and I probably won't be fielding my Slan that often. One, because he's a ton of points, and that I'll have to build a new list around it. We're using the same models, but obviously I'll switch out probably this dude or this dude. But if he dies, that character dies. I might give myself like a few barriers, so I'll say, okay, if my Slan dies while I'm playing an active game, I'll roll a die, and on a roll of a 1, he dies for real, like in my story. And so I'm going to have a little, small campaign journal where I'm keeping track of cool things that have happened, of progress toward gaining the lizards back into existence, and stuff like that. And then when, characters kind of fall back and then lose all their progress. So what I might say is some unattainable goal, right? Because I'm going to be playing for a long time or whatever. But I might say if a specific character survives 100 straight battles without dying, then they have become a real lizard, and my goal is completed or whatever. Now, that realistically won't happen, but it's something cool to keep in mind, right? If I can keep my old blood alive, or something like that, or my priestess. And so the other cool thing is it gives me a narrative reason for him to want to kill different enemies, okay? One is, if the Slan can conjure lizards from memory and kind of make a fake version of them, then there's no reason why he couldn't conjure up other things they remember from the old world. So if I'm playing against, or things that they've seen, right? So if I'm playing against an Order army, because we're both Order, there might be narrative reasons in the mortal realms why they would fight, but I would have it in my kind of narrative that this is training, right? That they're actually on their home planet Star, and this land has conjured a fake army for them to take on. So in certain circumstances, it'd be okay if they die because they really stay their blade, because, they're just figments of this land's imagination anyway, and he's just running kind of war game battle practice up in a Star. So that's why they fight Order. Why they fight Chaos is obvious. And then why they fight Destruction or Death. Well, oftentimes it'll be to find an objective. And in this narrative that I'm building, right, that I'm forging, relics from the Age of Myth and beyond, from the old world essentially, and just relics from all over the realms, help the Slan, Jeremodal, remember old things that he hasn't. Like, if you live for millennia like the Slan do, you're going to forget some things. And relics help recall those memories and thus make his memory of his soldiers stronger. So that's the reason they would be fighting. So, for instance, if the city of the death-controlled city of Shadespire, there are old relics there, right? And these relics will help and expand Jeremodal's thought process and allow him better, better ability to conjure better soldiers. So those are the reasons, those are the things I think that that's what forging the narrative is to me, at least. Having reasons that your army would be fighting this force, having reasons why your army could die in the game but still be alive, and having reasons for why, for your characters and motivations, and something that from role-playing games. In role-playing games, it's more than the sum of its parts. It's if role-playing games were just a war game, then I wouldn't be attached to my character each battle. If they died, I'd be like, well, I'll just roll up a new one. But the reason people don't want to die in those games is because you grow attached to your character and its motivations. Now, because that's an individual scale, it's much easier to do. It's harder to do that on a wider army-wide scale, which is why I think it should be restricted to characters you can kind of identify, like this little skink with his little hammer, or this leader skink who's standing on the rock, right? Or this kit-bashed Scar veteran that I haven't showed you, and he's standing on these rocks, and he has a cloak that's actually a bit from a Demon Prince kit, and it's the Demon Prince's loincloth. So in his story, he slew a Demon Prince and took his loincloth as a cape, which sounds disgusting. Like, hopefully it wasn't a Demon Prince of Nurgle or anything. But having your characters have motivations makes the game more than the sum of its parts. And you might find yourself even being like, well, tactically I need to charge into battle with this character or whatever, but I really don't want to, because what if that character dies? And, like, I will feel worse when the skink priestess dies than if it's just like, oh, well, this is a battle and I'm going to send these units in as chaff or whatever. Now, maybe if you're playing Chaos or you're playing Skaven, that's part of that narrative. You're like, ha, I don't care. Like, these little Skaven, dudes can die. Like, we send them in to just die for the leader Skaven, right? That's their whole thing. But anyway, I've been rambling enough. That was my talk on my first 1,000 point army for Age of Sigmar, my excitement to play, my thoughts on GW, and my thoughts on forging the narrative and what that means. I don't think it means let's read a passage that GW wrote and then reenact it. That you can do if you and your opponent are both really interested in that, but I think that forging narrative has more to do with the game being more than the sum of its parts. It's more than just models and dice. There's a reason why we're using models and not using little cardboard markers, is because there's some element of, well, you want to build a character into your model, right? There's a reason why this dude is standing like this, and why he's painted this way, and why he has this glove. Like, how did he lose his hand? Because he has, like, a robotic hand now. Well, not robotic, but, arcane construct of some kind. And I haven't made up a story for them, but there you go. So that's my thoughts. This is Jeremodal's Constellation, and Jeremodal the Bullslan, and tell me what you think, and looks like it is right 30-minute mark, so apologize for a long video. Thanks. Catch you in the next one.